Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SRC Chats Quarantine Edition, where we check in on the members of staff at the UWI Seismic Research Center. I'm Omari Graham, member of the Education and Outreach team, and today it is our pleasure to have with us Professor Richard Robertson. Everybody calls him Richie. He's a geologist at the center and a former director. So, Richie, welcome to SRC Chats.
Yes, thank you very much, Omari. Glad to be here.
Nice. So, what have you been up to in this unprecedented time, having to work from home?
Well, I mean, it is a challenge. I mean, I've been up to trying to get work done, and it's with occupying the confines of your house with two kids, two young girls, one 15 and one 12, more or less, almost 12. And my wife is a little bit more trying to find a space, both for yourself and to actually do work, and also to get them to get some sort of schedule. So I think I may probably get into a stage where I cannot get something done, but initially it was difficult. Yeah, I mean, they're not. Also, I travel a lot and I move around a lot, so I guess they're not accustomed to seeing me stationary for so long. So
they were excited to have you home.
Well, yeah, I guess, yes. My younger daughter loves to give hugs, so I've had to get accustomed to getting lots of hugs.
A lot of hugs.
In the morning, yeah.
Well, that's nice. So you mentioned traveling a lot. What would your typical responsibilities be at the center?
Well, I'm the geologist. I used to be director a couple of months, a long time ago. So I mean, we monitor earthquakes and volcanoes throughout the island. So we have to do quite a bit of field work, both field work. I mean, here in Trinidad and nearabouts, but also traveling up the islands, which involves, you know, getting on a plane and going to somewhere else and spending some time. There's a lot of meetings that you go to. There's a lot of work you do in the field. So, I mean, in fact, just before there was a lockdown in Trinidad, we were due to go to St. Vincent for, in fact, I had in fact just come back from Montserrat, like a week before, and I was due to go to St. Vincent the following week for a week-long trip where we were doing some training in communities. And then I had another trip lined up for St. Vincent like a week or two after that. So that's the kind of things that you would routinely do. So I'm often away like a couple of days up to a week, more or less once every month, or sometimes more depending on what it is.
So given that responsibility, I figure that you'd have been involved in managing volcanic crises throughout your career. So given this health crisis that we are now in, do you see any parallels between what you would have experienced probably in your career or even before that?
Well, in fact, a lot actually. And it's I mean, the virus is terrible what it's doing, and it's terrible what it's doing to people who have suffered from it. But as a scientist, it's very interesting to see how it's being played out, both in terms of how the science is playing into it, and essentially how it is as human beings, we have to try to figure out what this is all about using scientific methods. And even in terms of how people are making use of the science, I think now people have learned about models. People are hearing about models and curves and flattening curves and all kinds of things that they
didn't. A lot of science.
Yeah, all the time. It's interesting how as we learn more, we respond differently to things. So initially there was a certain amount of information that a certain way people understood what the virus was doing. And then as information and understanding changes, your response, it feeds into sort of the policy response. And in a sense, when you're looking at the things that we monitor, earthquakes and volcanoes, we have to do the same kind of thing. We always give people the information that how we understand the system is working now. So what do we understand with the volcano, about the earthquake at this present time? But as we get more information, we try to provide that to them for them to respond in a way that would impact them less. And essentially, that is what you see being played out. It's being played out in a global sense, so that people worldwide those who have not had to either interact with scientists or use scientific information have quickly learned how to, and they have had to learn how to assimilate that, how to get that, how to pick from what people are saying, what's useful to them and how they respond. I think it's good generally, that it seems to me generally that people have been listening to the information that is out there, have been listening to the scientific. It's been led to a large extent by the science, and the response, that is the policy response, generally the government response and the authorities response to it, more or less, they have mainly been weighing in a lot on the scientific knowledge, which is good. And that perhaps augurs well for if we have to deal with volcanic emergencies and earthquakes and those other things. We hope that they would respond, in other words, to us in the same kind of way, right? That would use the knowledge. The other thing that's interesting is that I think people are beginning to understand that there's this thing called uncertainty. There's even though the scientists, and even though we understand certain things in a certain way, there's a certain amount of it that we don't really quite understand. And therefore, it's only when we dig into it more and we understand it more that we could take action. So there's a certain amount of what we call uncertainty. There's a certain amount of things that we at the onset, we don't quite understand. It's only when we get more data, more information, and we understand it, our model of what is happening and our understanding of it changes. And again, it's interesting how that develops. For example, at the beginning, at the outset, I've been to I've been to the East, so I've been to Japan and China, and when I go there, you see people have been using masks, right? And you always wonder, why is it they walk around with masks? That's because their experience, their life, they had had by then experience in dealing with SARS and various other things, and their response is different. We in the Western world wouldn't. But now that we understand how it is, in other words, the science and the knowledge have been transferred. At the beginning, we weren't wearing masks. Now I go about in Trinidad and everybody, thankfully are using masks, because now we understand that that's the mechanism by which we could protect our others from ourselves. As we have to protect each other by doing this. So again, it shows you how, as knowledge improve, our understanding improve, we take actions to protect and to respond to the things that don't hazards. And this is what, scientists who monitor hazards like ourselves, this is what we're trying to do.
Okay. All right, nice. So that was a lot, but it was good stuff. So given the similarities between the two crises, do you think that there's anything that the SRC could learn from the local response in Trinidad and Tobago, the regional response, or even the world response? Do you think there's anything we could learn?
Well, I think there's a lot, and there's a lot that we would learn. There's a lot to be said about how we operate. Seismic have always had networks that requires us to operate remotely. In other words, we put instruments up in the islands to monitor phenomena that is several kilometers away from us. So we have always had to find a way in which we bring in data remotely and be able to work remotely. But those of us who are in Trinidad have always been often coming into the office to work.
To work remotely.
Right. Yeah. We haven't applied the remoteness in which we have the network to the remoteness in which we work in the headquarters, say. And I think we have had to do that much more. I think the fact that the network is the way in which we operate has always had an inbuilt kind of mechanism to work remotely have allowed us to do that. So that the technicians now could process the earthquakes. It's not the ideal, it's not the best. And of course we'll go back to, coming in here because it's easier to see the monitor and get where the data is. But the point is that the whole business of working remotely and improving the way in which we do that, that we've always been doing it, and I think we have to improve the way in which we do it. The other thing I think that we could learn is how to utilize and how to transmit. I mean, we have a big thing about outreach and getting information out to the public. There's a lot of that has gone on by the policymakers. There's a lot. Most of the territories that have had to deal with a crisis have had daily briefings in which the policymakers have had to come out and update people, and the scientists, in this case, most often the chief medical officers and people like that, the health people have had to come out. We have done it. We do it routinely, but again, it's interesting to see how it's done and what they've done, what they've said, what they've not said, and that kind of thing. That is again is interesting to see. It's interesting to see how the authorities themselves have reacted to the information. Some of them differently. Different islands, they've all generally taken it, but in different ways. again, that could tell us about how we ourselves, when we have to, when we have to then give them guidance and advise them, how it would hopefully improve our way in which we do it. So there's lots. That's just some examples, but there's lots that I think we can learn in terms of using scientific information, delivering to the public, and also interacting with the civil authorities that have to use that information to make best decisions.
To make decisions. All right. Yeah. So on a more personal note now, I know you would have been in St. Vincent in 1979 when La Soufrière erupted there. Do you have any memories of that time that kind of is forefront in your mind now that you're going through this disruption of daily life? What was that like? What could we expect moving forward? Most of us have never lived through something of this magnitude.
Well, again, yeah. It's certainly the
How old were you, by the way?
Huh?
How old were you, by the way?
I was doing A-level, so I think I probably was 18. Yeah, these 79 eruptions in Vincent, I mean, to a large extent, that's why I am doing what I'm doing now. That's
cool.
That's to tell you the impact of it. It kind of determined my pathway in terms of career. I mean, I became a geologist, one specialized in volcanoes, essentially because of 79.
Because of that.
So that's how big it was. I mean, if you lived in St. Vincent, it was really a big thing. It basically shut down the country, and it affected schooling. You're talking about people who were out of school for, basically, you didn't, just like what's probably going to happen in Trinidad now. Once the eruption started in April, nobody went back to school until September, essentially. And because all the schools were used for evacuation shelters, all the people from the northern part of the country had to come to the south. So all the schools, all the community centers, all the churches, everything was rammed with people who had come from north. They moved 14,000 people. So it means that during the time that the people were there, you couldn't have church, you couldn't have school, you couldn't have, right? So everything was shut down. I think the difference is that people were still able to go, people in the south was still able to go about. We didn't have the social distancing thing we had now. But certainly it affected what people were able to do. So you didn't have a third term like you're probably not going to have now in Trinidad. You had a second term, and one school stopped. The next time you went to school was in September. So that affected the whole school calendar, the academic calendar. So, people who had SEA, we couldn't have SEA. SEA had to change. Well, in our case, it was common entrance, right? They had to change it because it was around the time a common entrance was supposed to be held. So it affected all of that. So the kind of thing that, certainly in terms of the academic environment and the schooling, the kind of thing that you have to do now, the kind of thing where, have to chop churches in a different kind of way and that kind of thing, that happened. Of course, I think for me personally, it affected me personally, but I was in sixth form and the only school that went back was the sixth form. So we after about 2 or 3 weeks, we had to go back to school because we had exams that year. We had GC, it was then when you had external exams, and our exams, it was St. Vincent alone. So it wasn't like CXC now where they're thinking of shifting the time period because everybody's affected. It was only St. Vincent alone. So it's either we sat the exam or we missed it. There was no choice. So people who had exams went back, and sixth form, I think we went back within a couple of weeks. I personally was involved in all kinds of things. I was in cadets, so I was involved in moving around evacuation centers. Because here we had people in shelters while people weren't sheltering in their home. People had been evacuated, so there's a lot of support that went into that. You had to find ways of kind of keeping people in evacuation shelters occupied. I was involved in cadets, so we used to do demonstrations. We used to provide. I was in PAN. We used to play steel PAN, and we used to go and entertain the people and things like that. So you had other things because people were out of their houses.
So there was some emotional support happening.
There was. Initially the first thing was to get people out of the way. So there was a mad rush to get people to the south. But once people were there for months, you then had to find ways of feeding them and occupying them and things like that. And there was a lot of support for that to the southern, because basically what you did is move everybody who was in the northern third of the country to the south. And everybody who was in the south had to then find ways of occupying that space with a lot more people. So, you had a lot more people everywhere in the south. You didn't have schools, so kids had to find things to do. So it was different. We weren't so much isolated in our houses as we are now. We could move about, but we were basically all cramped into a much smaller space. And we had to learn to live with each other much more closely than
much more closely. And now we are being asked to be much further apart. So I think that is all we have time for today. So we really want to thank you very much, Professor Richard Robertson, for taking some time out to spend some time with us at SRC Chats. So as we go, we just want to remind everyone to stay tuned to our YouTube channel and our social media channels for more episodes as we continue to check in with different persons and see how exactly they keep working, how they keep monitoring volcanoes, how they keep monitoring earthquakes as we continue to stay at home and continue to battle the COVID-19. So that's it for this episode. See you next time.
Take care.